Hey guys, welcome back to Refuge Recovery by Levine, the Buddhist path to recovering from addiction. Now we're starting part 2, Reflections on Recovery. The following are personal recovery stories from members of our Refuge Recovery community. We have included these stories for those new to recovery to get a sense of the various ways in which recovery happens. You are not alone in your suffering, your confusion, or your path of healing and recovery. We're starting off with chapter 15, Lynn. I grew up in Berkeley, California in the 1950s. I began drinking when I was in high school. I drank because I wanted to fit in with my peers. After graduation, I went away to college but left after a semester and got married because I was pregnant. At the time, my drinking was limited to weekends, socializing with my husband and our friends. I didn't start drinking every day until a few years later, when my husband and I split up. I started to drink every night after work, which seemed perfectly normal, having grown up in a home where my parents drank every evening. But I had a low tolerance for alcohol and often found myself in compromising situations. I experimented with various types of drugs as well, which was prevalent during the 60s. I behaved in ways I never would have behaved sober, and I did things that were not in my daughter's best interest. On one occasion, I was living in Santa Barbara as part of the communal living situation. My drinking eventually got me kicked out. In need of a place to stay, I bought a tent and lived in it with a 4-year-old daughter for 3 weeks. A year or so later, I returned to Northern California, began working as a mail carrier, and met my second husband. After 7 years of marriage, we divorced and I moved again. One night after a party, I got pulled over for drunk driving and was taken to jail in handcuffs. Although I found this experience humiliating, it did not stop my drinking. I remember the look of disgust on my daughter's face each time I walked in the house drunk or brought my date home for the night. I continued drinking and using drugs for many years. It wasn't until after my daughter graduated from college that I hit rock bottom. In 1984, my daughter married. My father died. I took a trip to Europe and I got clean and sober. My sobriety date is November 25th. I woke up the Friday after Thanksgiving with a hangover. There was nothing unusual about my drinking the day before. Nothing dramatic had happened. It was just another day of misery. What was different was that I talked about it in a counseling session later that day. I admitted to the therapist that I drank too much and took Valium. Her response surprised me. She told me that if I wanted to continue seeing her, I would have to go to Alcoholics Anonymous, or AA. I had tried for over a year to stop drinking on my own and had been unsuccessful. My solution had not worked, and my outlook on life was bleak. At home, after the counseling appointment, I phoned someone I knew who went to AA and asked him where I could find a meeting. He offered to come to my house and talk to me. During our talk, he told me his story of finding recovery and then directed me to a meeting that night. I drove to the meeting with trepidation. When I arrived, I debated about whether or not to go inside. Raise your hand if you'd been in that position outside of an AA or NA meeting. Definitely resonates in that part. I could not believe that my life had come to this. I was furious that I had to walk into a room and sit down with a group of people who I imagined were losers. I don't remember much of what was said at the meeting, but I do remember that when the meeting was over, I was surrounded by women giving me phone numbers and talking about a big book. They told me to come back the next day at noon. My head was swimming. They all seemed overly friendly and much too excited. What did I have in common with these women? Did I even belong in AA? The whole thing seemed so corny, saying, "Hi, so-and-so," and having play cards on the wall with sayings that were so elementary. Nevertheless, I began going to AA meetings every day and received a 24-hour chip. I enjoyed the attention paid to me as a newcomer. I was still a reluctant participant, however. I surrendered to the program of AA a week later. It was a Monday night. I recall the moment vividly. I arrived just before the meeting started and sat in the back of the room. I was feeling defeated. A woman in front of me turned around and said, "Hello." She asked me what time of day was most difficult for me. I told her it was when I got home from work. She gave me her phone number and told me to call her every day when I got home. That was the beginning of my journey in Alcoholics Anonymous, and she was my first sponsor. Making the decision to participate in AA was a pivotal point in my life because I chose to go down an unfamiliar path. I adopted a new way of life in order to save my life. I trusted that a group of people in AA knew better than I did how to live sober. I turned my life and will over to the group. That was my third step. Made a decision to turn over my will and our life over to the care of God as we understood him, because I did not believe in God. Turning my life over to a group worked because I was sober today. However, I made a sacrifice that I was unaware of at the time. I gave up self-reliance. In order to fit in and to be part of the AA group, I believed that I could no longer rely on myself. The AA literature states that we must rely on a higher power in order to stay sober. More would be revealed. In 1988, with 4 years of sobriety, I attended a workshop on living and dying led by Levine. He offered to teach, I'm guessing that Stephen Levine must be Noah Levine's dad, but we'll find out. He offered to teach meditation to anyone who was interested. So a group of us met at 7 a.m. before the workshop began. I was thus introduced to Vipassana meditation. I'm going to spell that Vipassana. Vipassana meditation. I began practicing and noticed the benefits immediately. So we all need to look that up. Vipassana. Vipassana meditation. I began practicing and noticed the benefits immediately. I had spent 5 years doing transcendental meditation in the 1970s, so I had faith in the benefit of meditation practice. With daily meditation, I found myself feeling calmer and more focused. I noticed a shift in the way I responded to difficult situations. More important, I felt connected in a way I had never felt before. When I listened to AA members talk about feeling connected to their higher power, I could not relate, nor did I relate with members said that coming to AA was like coming home. For me, finding meditation was like coming home. So began a regular meditation practice. Some days I meditated for 5 minutes, and other days for 20 minutes. I began attending day-long retreats at Spring Rock Meditation Center in Marin County and reading books on mindfulness meditation and Buddhism. I was dedicated to the practice of meditation, yet I felt like I was living in two worlds. No one I knew at the AA was interested in Buddhism and former meditation practices. Meditation was mentioned in AA's 11th step. However, it was closely connected with the prayer of St. Francis. I did not feel comfortable talking about meditation with my friends at AA, nor did I feel comfortable talking about my recovery with people I encountered in meditation circles. I'm going to take a pause there, because I happen to have the prayer of St. Francis. So let's see what the 11th step states about it through this prayer of St. Francis, and we'll see how we feel about it in the sense of meditation. St. Francis' peace prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. O divine master, soul. Now here I actually crossed that out and replaced it with being part and parcel of God. So I'm going to read it the way I wrote it because it's my channel, so there. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Being part and parcel of God. Back to the prayer. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console. To be understood as to understand. To be loved as to love. For it is in giving that we receive. It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Well, for whatever that's worth to you, I think that goes well with meditation. Because it brings you back to center and it crosses you out of your rat tail thoughts. To console instead of to be consoled. You know? It's a good way to be. It takes the drama out of your life that we often start ourselves by trying to justify our emotions or having our emotions be validated by others. We don't need any of that. But back to this. Meditation was mentioned in the AA's 11th step. However, it was closely connected with the prayer of St. Francis. I did not feel comfortable talking about meditation with my friends at AA, nor did I feel comfortable talking about my recovery with people I encountered in meditation circles. What became clear to me is that I felt ashamed of being an alcoholic. Being a meditator definitely held a higher status in my mind. My feelings associated with alcoholism was not unfounded. As a social worker, I met plenty of professionals who expressed negative views of those with drug or alcohol problems. For years, I went to meetings, worked on the steps with a sponsor, and walked the AA talk. I also had a meditation practice. At times, I felt like immersing myself in Buddhism, in Buddhist way of life. Then guilt would set in and I would remember that I was an alcoholic, which meant that I was bound to the program. Therein lies the problem. I had heard it said over and over again in AA meetings that if I did not follow the AA program of recovery, I would drink again. It felt like I had no choice when it came to AA. In 1992, I attended my first residential meditation retreat, a 6-day women's retreat. In a student/teacher interview, I identified myself as an alcoholic. Looking back, I realized that with 7 years of sobriety, I saw myself first and foremost as an alcoholic. My sobriety had not yet given me a sense of who I was without that label. Hence the problem with the program. Not to insult anybody or the program. Just saying. In the summer of 1995, I hit a wall. I was doing everything the program suggested, but my life felt empty. I was depressed and lacking spirit. Well, if you keep saying that your major malfunction is your identity at the start of every meeting, what do you expect? In the summer of 1995, I hit a wall. I was doing everything the program suggested, but my life felt empty. I was depressed and lacking spirit. With over 10 years of sobriety, I knew that the AA solution would be rework the steps and work with others. Another option, quoted in the big book, is to seek outside help, which is what I did. With some encouragement, I made the decision to attend a week-long outpatient program called Survivors. offered by an addiction treatment center in Arizona. Arizona. The workshop delves into childhood trauma that impacts current day life. And therein lied, I'm going to pause here and just give my 2 cents. Delving into the cause of the addiction was vital for me to break my addiction, along with people, places, and things, which we get from the AA and NA program. So I'm not dissing the program. I'm just saying there's good and bad in everything, as a teacher once said. If I hadn't understood the cause of the addiction and had just stuck to I'm an addict, I might not be here today. So this is really resonating with me. It involved the 5 days of intense experimental work based on past events in my life that were traumatic. And that, by the way, what they're describing here is not easy. It's not. And I've heard people speak of kind of a magic bullet where if you just accept it and walk away, and there are some sacred medicines that can help with that. So I'm not dissing the possibility, but experience has shown me for myself that you do need to look at it, acknowledge it, honor it, and then you can let it go for real, not just for a time. It's heavy work though. You definitely need a support group, and I highly recommend that if you're dealing with childhood traumas that affected your addiction deeply to the point where you went into denial over it until your life started falling apart and things like that. I mean, when it's heavy work like that, you definitely need a support group of someone that, or some people that have experienced the same type and level of traumas that you have, so that you can actually be heard and actually be understood, so that can actually be acknowledged and then let go once accepted. It's a process. You need a good support team for that. The resulting emotions were processed with the goal of resolving any remaining grief. Beautifully stated. It's the grief of what you didn't naturally get to experience, as opposed to, you know, if you hadn't had that trauma, you might have had a happy childhood. What's that? So it's those things we grieve as well. It's part of that letting go. We have to grieve what was lost. Although I had discussed childhood issues over the years in counseling, at this point in my sobriety, I was interested in digging deeper in order to resolve those issues. Not put a little blanket over them and ignore they're there. I was interested in digging deeper in order to resolve those issues. I flew from California to Arizona and checked in for the workshop, which involved daily group work and lots of writing. It says write it down. What? Okay. A small group of us met each day with 2 well-trained facilitators. On the last day of the workshop, I told one of the leaders that I felt ripped open and unable to put myself back together, which is what I said about it being heavy work. That is perfectly stated the way she said it. I told one of the leaders that I felt ripped open and unable to put myself back together. She suggested I become an inpatient in the treatment center. I spent the next 5 weeks in treatment, where I was forced to look at some painful, unresolved issues from my past. 5-6 weeks. It's a number that keeps coming up as I've been researching healing modalities the last 6 months. 5 or 6 weeks of consistent work. You are trying to change your whole life after all. Give yourself that time. I was forced to look at some painful, unresolved issues from my past. In the process, I uncovered beliefs that were blocking my progress in recovery. Boom! Gosh, this book is good. Okay, so why do we look at ourselves? Are we trying to torture ourselves? Are we trying to bring up the past? No, we're trying to do this. In the process, I uncovered beliefs that were blocking my progress in recovery. If you don't do the homework, if you don't do the hard work, you're not going to understand yourself enough to go, holy shit, that's a belief that I bought or that was given to me that is actually detrimental to my well-being. I see you now, I understand you now, and I can bypass you now. I won't keep falling in that hole anymore because now I see the hole and I'm going to avoid it. Beautifully stated in this. In the process, I uncovered beliefs that were blocking my progress in recovery. The primary belief I discovered was that I felt unworthy of love. The underlying message I gave myself was something is wrong with me, quote unquote, a belief related to that was that I needed to be perfect in order to be loved. Returning home, and it also makes me think about that whole having to step up in every meeting and go, I'm an alcoholic, or I'm this, or I'm it's you might as well be saying something's wrong with me. It's a belief that you can let go of because there's nothing wrong with you. You just haven't understood yourself enough to love yourself properly. Return, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just something that has to be corrected. Another important shift occurred in my life at the time. After 22 years of being single, I met a man who became my husband. For the next 5 years, my primary focus was on developing a healthy relationship with him. Although I had been married before, the marriage felt like a first. The fact that we were both in recovery and brought a willingness to be present for the relationship made a huge difference. This was also a time of transition. We moved from the Bay Area in California to Bend, Oregon. That's funny because I'm from California and I'm in Oregon right now. And started life together in a new community. As we became connected to the AA community in Bend, we also became aware of shared interest in meditation. I continued my meditation practice and my husband began to join me in that practice. In 2000, he helped start a meditation sangha, S-A-N-G-H-A, in Bend. A year later, we returned to California for 3 years to finish earning retirement credits. During that time, we attended weekly sangha with an established teacher and had the opportunity to attend one-day retreats. As a result, we expanded our knowledge of Vipassana meditation and Buddhism. For the 3 years we lived in California, we were also part of the AA and Al-Anon communities. About the same time, I began attending meditation retreats once a year. After returning to Oregon in 2004, I attended a weekend retreat with Noah Levine, or book's author. I was attracted to his retreat because it encouraged social workers to attend and refer to the Buddhist path as revolutionary. In my heart, I was a revolutionary, and I was excited at the prospect of viewing the Buddhist path in this way. In addition, I had been to several workshops with Noah's father, Stephen Levine, in the 1970s and in the 1980s, and had a great deal of respect for his teachings. The weekend experience was invigorating for me, leading a new view to the incorporation of Buddhist thought into my recovery life. Although the retreat topic was not related to the 12-step recovery, many people there were in recovery, and Noah made references to his recovery. It was a comfortable atmosphere for me. Fast forward to 2010. By then, I had attended 2 7-day meditation retreats that I found to be very beneficial to my meditation practice. A major turning point for me came in September of 2010, when Noah led a 2-day retreat titled Breaking the Addiction to Our Minds, a Buddhist and recovery retreat. 5 of us from Bend, AA, including my husband, attended this retreat. It was a pivotal point in my recovery path. Over the course of the weekend, I had numerous insights related to my recovery in AA and was free to speak about AA and Buddhism in the same room. The retreat provided a forum for all of us in or out of AA to talk about our struggles with addiction and to find solutions in the Buddhist path. Noah told us about the Buddhist recovery groups meeting in Los Angeles twice a week. He shared with us his meeting format, including the 4 truths of recovery. the Eightfold Path to Recovery, and a Buddhist version of the 12 Steps. With these in hand, the 5 of us from Bend returned home and started a Buddhist recovery group. Connecting the dots, in Noah's preamble, he states, quote, "All beings have the power and the potential to free themselves from suffering." This statement was an aha moment for me. Earlier, I said that I gave up self-reliance. I understand now why I was stuck for so many years. I did not trust myself. In AA, I had been taught to rely on a power outside myself, and I took that instruction literally. In this Eightfold Path to Recovery, Noah states, quote, "We believe in the human capacity for change," end quote. That means that I am not only have the capacity for change, but that I can rely on myself to seek that change. When I befriended myself at 10 years sober, I began seeking answers from within. In doing so, I regained self-reliance. Without self-reliance, without knowing thyself, when I befriended myself at 10 years sober, I began seeking answers from within. In doing so, I regained self-reliance. Without self-reliance, how could I trust that following the Buddhist path would keep me on the path? And without trust in myself, how could I follow a path, Buddhism, that tells me to trust in my own experience? In the third of the 4 truths of recovery, Noah states, quote, "Eventually you will come to a verified faith in the path of recovery / awakening through the actions you take on the path." Through the actions you take on the path, you will build faith in your ability to save yourself. What? Yes! Although it took me years to bring AA recovery and Buddhism together, it was through my personal experience in both AA and Buddhism recovery that I was able to do so. The pieces of the puzzle now fit. With trust in myself and the teachings to guide me, I can navigate the path. Thank you, Lynn. And that is it for today, guys. Hasta mañana. Namaste.